In August of 2019, a team of scientific divers from the Federal University of Pará descended 47 meters below the murky surface of the Amazon River, near the confluence with the Negro River, just outside Manaus. The mission was routine: collect sediment samples to study the riverbed fauna. But when the sonar picked up an anomaly in the submerged rock wall, everything changed. There, sealed for centuries, was the entrance to a cave. And inside it, preserved by the near-total absence of oxygen and a constant temperature of 18 degrees Celsius, were objects, 20 of them. Objects that had no immediate explanation. Objects that the archaeologists who arrived afterward would spend months trying to identify, catalog, and understand. Some were familiar. Others defied everything that was known about the pre-colonial and colonial history of the Amazon. The discovery was called the greatest underwater archaeological find in South American history by major news outlets, yet almost no one heard about it. Today, you are going to learn about all 20 objects, one by one, and when you reach object number 1, you will understand why certain authorities tried to suppress this discovery from ever reaching the public. Stay until the end, because object number 3 is going to leave you speechless. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, subscribe right now because every week we bring you stories like this one that the mainstream media never tells. Object number 20, a fishing net made of tucumã palm fiber. Tucumã is a palm tree native to the Amazon, and its fibers have been used for centuries by the indigenous peoples of the region to make ropes, baskets, and above all, fishing nets. The net found in the cave measured 2 meters and 40 centimeters in length and had been folded with impressive precision, as if someone had stored it there with the intention of coming back for it. The knots were of a specific type that researchers called the Amazonian double knot, a technique that the oldest riverside dwellers of the Amazon still know today, but that is nearly extinct. What made this net extraordinary was not only the perfect preservation of the fibers. It was the fact that attached to it was a float made from the cork of a kumaru tree, a tree whose seeds are used to produce the famous tonka bean that perfumeries around the world pay fortunes to import. The combination of tucumã and kumaru in a single piece of fishing equipment had never been documented before by ethnobotanists. It was a blending of knowledge from two distinct peoples, the Moura and the Maui, who according to Portuguese colonial records never traded with each other. That net alone would have been enough to spark weeks of academic debate. Object number 19. A Marajoara ceramic pot. Marajo is an island in the Amazon Delta, and the Marajoara culture produced between the years 400 and 1400 AD some of the most sophisticated ceramics on the American continent. The pot found in the cave stood 34 centimeters tall, had a perfectly circular mouth, and was decorated with geometric patterns in red and black on a white background that specialists immediately identified as typical of the classical Marajoara period, between the 8th and 10th centuries. But there was a troubling detail. The inside of the pot still contained residue of an organic substance that later analysis identified as pirarucu fat, mixed with urucum and fine clay. It was a mixture used to waterproof fabrics or for high-status body painting, according to archaeologists. The fact that a Marajoara pot was sitting more than 500 kilometers upriver from Marajo Island, inside a submerged cave near Manaus, overturned the entire academic narrative about the territorial limits of Marajoara culture. Either they traveled far more than anyone had imagined, or there was an underground trade route that is yet to be mapped. Object number 18. An obsidian blade. Obsidian is volcanic glass. It does not exist naturally in the Amazon. The nearest point where obsidian is found in South America is in the Ecuadorian Andes, more than 3,000 kilometers from Manaus in a straight line. And yet there it was, an 18-centimeter blade, knapped with a precision that archaeologists described as extraordinary even by Andean standards, fitted with a cedar wood handle lashed with tucumã fiber and coated in andiroba resin. The blade had been made by someone who knew Andean stone knapping techniques but used exclusively Amazonian materials for the handle. It was a hybrid object, born from the encounter of two worlds that official historiography insists on treating as completely separate. Tell us in the comments below how many kilometers you think this blade traveled before ending up in that cave. Stay here and keep watching because object number 15 is going to matter a lot. Object number 17, a ceremonial paddle. not just any paddle. A ritual paddle 1 meter and 20 centimeters long, carved from red angelum wood, with engravings depicting a great serpent coiled in a spiral on the blade and a jaguar with an open mouth on the handle. The serpent and the jaguar are the two most sacred animals in the mythology of virtually every indigenous people of the Amazon basin. The paddle had no signs of use. It had never been placed in water to row. It was a ritual object, perhaps used in coming-of-age ceremonies or as an offering. What puzzled the researchers was the quality of the engravings. They had been made with metal tools, not stone. The marks in the wood were unambiguous. But what metal was it, and where did it come from? Before the arrival of the Portuguese? That is one of the questions the archaeology team is still working to answer. Object number 16. A painted gourd. Gourds were used throughout the Americas as containers, musical instruments, and ritual objects for thousands of years. The gourd from the Amazon cave measured 45 centimeters in diameter and was covered in paintings that iconography specialists took 3 weeks to begin classifying. The images showed human figures in positions that recalled shamanic healing practices, but interspersed with representations of constellations that did not correspond to any known Brazilian indigenous astronomical system. An astronomer from the University of São Paulo who was consulted identified the constellations as possible representations of the Southern Cross as seen from a latitude much further south, somewhere between 20 and 25 degrees south, far below Manaus. That would mean the gourd was painted by someone who had traveled to southern Brazil, or who had received astronomical knowledge from someone who lived there. A painted gourd that encoded the night sky from a place hundreds of kilometers away. Object number 15. A wooden tablet with an unknown script. This is where things get serious. The tablet measured 22 by 14 centimeters and was made of sucupira wood, one of the hardest and most resistant timbers in the Amazon. Carved into it were 47 symbols arranged in regular horizontal lines. They were not decorative pictograms. They were symbols repeated in patterns that immediately suggested the possibility of phonetic or syllabic writing to at least 3 linguists who were consulted. Pre-Columbian indigenous writing is extremely rare in the Americas. The Maya had writing. The Aztecs had writing. But no indigenous people of the Brazilian Amazon has ever been documented as having developed a writing system. If this tablet is confirmed as a writing system, it will be the greatest discovery in the history of South American archaeology. Full stop. Carbon-14 dating placed the wood between the 13th and 15th centuries, before the arrival of Cabral. The debate is open, and it is explosive within the academic world. Object number 14. A copper funerary mask. Copper does not occur naturally in metallic form in most of the Amazon. To work with copper, you need smelting, and smelting requires sophisticated metallurgical technology. The mask had the shape of a human face, with stylized features including almond-shaped eyes, a broad nose, and thin lips, and measured 28 centimeters in height. It had been cold-hammered from a sheet of copper of uniform thickness, a technique that metallurgical specialists associated with the peoples of the northern Andes, particularly the Chimu culture of Peru. But the mask was here, in the heart of the Amazon. And it had been used. There were cord marks in the side holes indicating it had been tied to someone's face, possibly in a funerary ritual, possibly in a war ceremony. The copper bore a uniform blue-green patina, confirming centuries of exposure to humidity before the cave was sealed. Drop a like right here if you are as stunned by this story as we are. Object number 13. A slit drum. Known among ethnomusicologists as a slit idiophone, this instrument is found in cultures across the entire world, from Africa to Oceania. The one from the cave was carved from a single tawari trunk, measured 60 centimeters in length, and had 2 parallel slits on the upper surface, creating 2 lips of different thicknesses that produced 2 distinct tones when struck. Percussionists and musicologists who tested replicas of the instrument identified the difference in pitch as a major third interval, exactly the same interval used in the slit drums of the Bora people of the Brazilian-Colombian border. But there was something more. The inside of the trunk had been treated with a resin that chemists identified as coumaru, combined with native beeswax. a combination that not only preserved the instrument, but also subtly altered the resonance of the sound, making it deeper and audible at greater distances. Someone had sophisticated acoustic engineering long before anyone imagined. Object number 12. A wild cotton textile. Wild cotton is different from the domesticated cotton that today covers farms in the Brazilian Cerrado. It grows spontaneously in various regions of the Amazon and was used by indigenous peoples long before the plant was domesticated. The textile from the cave measured 80 by 60 centimeters and had been spun on a backstrap loom, a portable type of loom worn strapped to the weaver's body. The pattern of the fabric was striped in colors identified as natural dyes, Genipapo for the blue-black and Urucum for the orange-red. But what drew the most attention was the density of the weave. 42 threads per centimeter, a fineness that rivals the finest pre-Columbian Andean textiles, and represents a level of textile skill that no historical or archaeological record had ever documented for Amazonian peoples. This single textile rewrote what we know about the sophistication of Amazonian weaving. Object number 11. A magnetite compass. Magnetite is a naturally magnetic mineral. Peoples in various parts of the world independently discovered that a fragment of magnetite suspended on a cord will always point toward magnetic north. The stone from the cave was tied to a strand of wild silk, the silk produced by the Automeris io moth that occurs naturally in the Amazon. The fragment, when hung on a free thread in the dry area of the cave during tests, consistently pointed north with a margin of error of less than 5 degrees. The magnetite bore heavy use marks along its edges, where indicating it had been handled hundreds of times. Someone in pre-Columbian Amazonia was using magnetic navigation. That does not appear in any historical record. None at all. Keep watching. We are about to get into the objects that make the others look simple. Object number 10. A wooden box with a joinery locking mechanism. The box measured 30 by 20 by 15 centimeters and was carved from IPA wood, probably the hardest and densest timber in all of Brazil. The locking system used a half-lap joint with a central pin, a carpentry mechanism that in Europe was not documented until the 14th century. The box was closed when it was found. Inside were 4 of the other objects on this list, organized with pieces of cotton between them to prevent damage. That meant someone, at some point, had chosen these specific objects, wrapped them carefully, and locked them in a box inside a cave. This was not an accident. It was an intentional deposit, a collection. Someone was preserving objects of value for the future, or hiding them from something. Object number 9. A map engraved in stone. A 40 by 30 centimeter slab of slate covered in engraved lines that geographers who analyzed it identified as representations of waterways. Not generic waterways, specific representations of the river system of the Middle Amazon, recognizable by their proportions and by the relative angles between the tributaries. The point where the lines converged, marked with a deeply engraved circle, corresponded approximately to the location of the cave itself, where the map was found. It was a map that led to itself. Cartographers estimated that producing this level of geographic precision would have required systematic observation and distance measurement over decades. Someone knew the Amazon basin with a precision that the Portuguese colonizers only achieved 2 centuries later, using European instruments. Keep watching. It is about to get even heavier. Object number 8. A clay sculpture of a hybrid being. The figure stood 25 centimeters tall and represented a being with a human body, a caiman head, and harpy eagle wings. 3 sacred animals from 3 different shamanic traditions, united in a single body. The clay was of a specific type called tabatinga, found primarily along the banks of the Solimões River, and had been fired at a uniform temperature that ceramicists estimated at around 800 to 900 degrees Celsius, a temperature that requires a built kiln, not an open fire. The sculpture had been painted after firing with at least 6 different pigments, some of which chemists have not yet fully identified. The figure held in its hands what appeared to be a small gourd, possibly representing a snuff gourd or another ritual botanical preparation. It was an object made by someone who moved between worlds, between the water, the sky, and the earth, and who mastered the technology of all 3. Object number 7. A set of 6 ritual rattles. Made of fired clay, with diameters between 6 and 9 centimeters, each filled with seeds from different species. Researchers identified the seeds as cumaru, acai, guaraná, tucumã, buriti, and Brazil nut, the 6 palms and trees most important to the diet and economy of the peoples of central Amazonia. Each rattle was painted with the image of the fruit of the species whose seeds it contained, a kind of pictographic labeling that ethnobotanists found at once practical and poetic. The rattles were tied together with a cotton cord in order of size. When played in sequence, they produced a simple pentatonic melody that an ethnomusicologist from the University of Campinas recognized as similar to ritual melodies documented among the Dasana people of the Upper Negro River. Tell us in the comments below which of these objects you find most impressive so far. Object number 6. A pyrite mirror. Pyrite is the mineral popularly known as fool's gold for its yellow metallic shine. But when polished to a flat surface, it functions as a mirror, and the Aztecs and Olmecs of Mesoamerica used pyrite mirrors in shamanic ceremonies to see other worlds. The mirror from the cave was 15 centimeters in diameter, and its surface had been polished to a degree of smoothness that physicists measured as equivalent to a low-quality modern mirror, still extraordinary for a technology without industrial abrasives. The mirror was set in a jacaranda wood frame with engravings of 5-pointed stars, a geometric form that does not appear in the iconography of any documented Amazonian indigenous people, but is common in Chimu and Inca iconography. Another connection with the Andes that official history cannot explain. Object number 5. A medicinal plant preserved with a labeled tag. A bundle of dried roots of a plant that botanists identified as Cisampulus pereira, known in Brazil as Milona or abutua, a plant with anti-inflammatory properties still used today in Amazonian folk medicine. But what made this object one of the most extraordinary in the collection was what was tied to it. A small wooden plaque with engraved symbols, the same symbols as the unknown script tablet that was object number 15. The plaque had 7 symbols. The linguists who analyzed both objects together became excited because the comparison suggested the symbols might be syllabic, and that the 7 symbols on the plaque could spell the name of the plant in some as yet undocumented Amazonian language. If confirmed, it would be the first evidence of a written botanical cataloging system in pre-Columbian Amazonia. A pharmacology written down, centuries before any Europeans set foot on the continent. Object number 4. A sleeping hammock woven from aruma fiber. Aruma is a plant in the ginger family, whose fibers are used by the indigenous peoples of the Negro River to weave the most beautiful and durable sleeping hammocks in the Amazon. The hammock from the cave measured 2 meters by 1 meter and 20 centimeters, exactly the standard size for an adult hammock. It had been woven with a triple stitch that modern indigenous artisans of the Negro River still recognize as the most difficult to execute, the result of years of learning. The ends of the hammock were attached to carved wooden rings bearing schematic human faces. Eyes closed, serene expression. The same expression found on funerary masks from several cultures around the world. It was a sleeping hammock, but it was also perhaps a hammock for the dead, a bed for the final journey. And folded carefully inside the hammock was the next object. Object number 3. A book. Yes, a book. Not a book as you know it, bound in leather with paper pages. It was a set of 23 sheets of Amazonian fig tree bark cloth, bound together at one end with a tucumã cord and covered on both sides in writing. The same writing as the tablet and the label. Linguists counted 847 distinct symbols across the entire book. A vocabulary compatible with a functional language capable of expressing abstract concepts. The bark cloth sheets had been treated with a resin solution that had made them as resistant as parchment. Carbon-14 dating placed the material between 1280 and 1420 AD. This was a document more than 600 years old, written in a language no one alive today can read, kept in a cave submerged in the Amazon River. What does it say? Nobody knows yet. And some people would prefer we never find out. Subscribe to the channel, because when the decipherment is published, we will bring it here first. Object number 2. A gold figurine. Small, only 9 centimeters tall but solid, weighing 847 grams of nearly pure gold, at 23 carats of purity according to X-ray fluorescence analysis. The figurine depicted a human figure seated with legs crossed, hands resting on knees, eyes open with inlaid black mica discs, creating an expression of intense concentration. The figure wore an engraved headdress that pre-Columbian art specialists identified as stylized but relatable to the headdresses of spiritual leaders, not warriors. It was a representation of a page, a healer, someone who guarded knowledge. The casting technique was lost wax, used by the Muisca people of Colombia to make their famous offerings to Lake Guatavita, the origin of the legend of El Dorado. A Muisca or Muisca-influenced figurine inside an Amazonian cave near Manaus. The legend of El Dorado was not about a place, it was about a route, and that route passed through the Amazon River. And now, object number 1. The object that certain authorities tried to keep out of the press. The object that led the federal government to place a 5-year secrecy order on part of the documentation from the discovery, a secrecy order that expired in 2024 and that made it possible to tell this story today. Object number 1 was a document. But not a document in an unknown script. It was a map. A map made of animal hide, likely tapir leather, cured until it was thin and durable as parchment. The map measured 60 by 90 centimeters, and it showed the Brazilian coastline, all of it, from Amapá to Rio Grande do Sul, with the main rivers marked, with the captaincies sketched, with names written, not in Portuguese, not in any European language, names written in the unknown script of the other objects, but also in certain locations, in a second writing system that paleographers identified immediately and with shock. It was Phoenician. Semitic Phoenician script from the first millennium before Christ. On a tapir hide, inside a cave, at the bottom of the Amazon River. The hypothesis of pre-Columbian contact between the Mediterranean and the Americas, ridiculed by mainstream archaeology for decades, suddenly had concrete material evidence that demanded explanation. And the explanation this map suggests changes everything you were ever taught about history in school. That is object number 1 from the Amazon cave, and the story is not over. The analyses continue. The book has not yet been deciphered. The map is still being studied by teams from 4 countries, and when the results are published, you are going to want to be here to find out. Tell us in the comments below what you felt when you heard this story. 1 word. Give me 1 word. I read every single one. And if you made it this far, you are the rare kind of person who still has genuine curiosity about the past. Share this video with someone who deserves to know this story. The Amazon holds secrets beneath its waters that we have barely begun to understand.